Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. In this series, you'll hear recruitment business owners, investors, and entrepreneurs talk about setting up, scaling, and developing their businesses. My name is Darragh Everard. I'm the country manager for the Anderson Partnership in Ireland, who has just completed an MBO and looking to rebrand to our new business, which will be called Urku. In this episode, we're talking to the usual host, Dualta Darragh, about his journey from leaving Ireland to enter recruitment in Australia, travelling to recruit in Canada, and then how that developed into a resume writing business and a rec-to-rec business that he now operates from his home just outside London. I'm over here for the weekend to see my godson, Dualta's little fella, and while we're here, we've basically been nerding up about recruitment, talking about all the businesses he works with, what works, what doesn't work, what he's learned from who are the best recruiters, what makes the best recruiters, what makes a recruitment business attractive, what helps retain staff, what makes staff engaged, and what makes them better recruiters. So hopefully you enjoy listening to his story this time. Hi, Dualta.
Hi, Darragh. How are you?
I'm good. You?
I'm great. Good to have you over here in lovely Arundel.
Yeah, it's hectic. So for everyone's benefit, myself and Dualta have known each other for 8 years or so, and this is the most insane lifestyle I've seen you living since our days of playing football all week and drinking all weekend and recruiting all week.
Do you want to give a bit of context to that?
Sure. So myself and Dualta met in Perth, both working for Robert Walters back in the boom time. And since then, you've had a lot of travel, a couple of kids, a dog, a house, and a business.
And you've been in my house for the last couple of days, and it's been a lot of nappies and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, outrageous. So we're going to talk through your story this time, okay? So you've been talking through lots of recruitment professionals' careers to date, and now we're going to find out a little bit about your story and how you've gotten to this point. So keen to start off at the start. So for most people who would be aware of you, they weren't aware of you 3 years ago, and now you're a guy with a funny name that's all over their LinkedIn. So where are you from?
So I'm from Buncrana, which is northwest of Ireland in Donegal, just beside the border with Derry.
What was life like there growing up?
It was good, but it was, rains a lot. I kind of remember being a kid and watching Baywatch and thinking I'd love to be living in somewhere sunny and living a beach style lifestyle. And luckily, we're able to do that later on.
Okay. So talk us through what happened when you finished secondary school in Buncrana. Out into the big bad world. What was the first step?
Well, I got rubbish results in my leaving cert because I'm not sure I've got a great attention span. I wasn't ever that great at school. So I went to a technical college with two of my best mates, Mary and John, and we messed around there for a couple of years. I did a HND, and then I finished a degree in business in Huddersfield. And I came back, and I remember I tried to get into recruitment in Dublin.
Why Huddersfield?
It was the quickest way I could get the degree finished at the time. When you do the first 2 years of a top-up degree from a regional college, you're in the north of Ireland. Your options are kind of limited, so it was just one of the only ones that were offering that specific course, and the course looked kind of easy.
An interesting word you used there was try to get into recruitment, because most people fall into it, or particularly when we were in Australia, just had to get into it for visa purposes. Why did you try and get into it?
So I remember when I was choosing my course for university, I was more, this is how sad I am. I was more interested in going through the prospectus or prospecti, as you might call it, depending on how many, um, and seeing what all the different jobs were. And I remember just loved reading about them. And I didn't know what recruitment was by the time I graduated, but there was something to do with the area of jobs and how that works that really fascinated me. So I remember from Donegal, my parents had just moved to Brussels. So I'm back there. I was living with a grandparent after university. And I remember just being like super broke, wondering what I could do, how I could get out of Donegal. And I tried to do a couple of interviews in Dublin, and I was highly unsuccessful.
Okay, why was that, do you think?
I think it was a bit raw, a bit immature, but very raw. I think I would have come across maybe not polished enough for the middle class Dublin recruitment market at the time. And I remember trying to research recruitment and what it was about. I even went into the library to try and get a book on it, and there was nothing really that was out there that would help that could kind of educate myself on.
So what was the next option?
The next option, I tried to get it. I remember I was working on a ferry in the summer. So I was stuck in a cabin with a guy with a drink problem and I was 12 hours a day with him parking cars on a ferry, over and back a stormy lake in Buncrana, which was full on. And I remember thinking, I need to get out of here. So I signed up for a part-time master's degree. I remember I could still get the dole and do that. And so I did that in Belfast. And then that kind of justified my existence a little bit to me at the time, which all young men need a bit of that when they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. And I went over to visit my parents in Brussels. And I remember thinking, this is a good spot. And so I spent the next couple of years studying for a bit in Ireland and then working in clubs and pubs in Brussels until I eventually moved over to Brussels.
So one thing that people talk about a lot is that any sort of further education after high school isn't relevant to recruitment. Do you use any aspect of your degree and master's?
No, but I think the fact that it was hard for me to do it, like academics didn't come easy to me, maybe the way it did for you, and the fact that I had to work really hard just to get through it, meant that it gave me a little bit of resilience, and I think I've taken that with me. And it took me a while to learn how to learn, if that makes sense. So like what my learning style was and how I could do that, and some basic research skills. And I think that inquisitiveness that you develop in university has definitely helped with recruitment. I'd also say whenever you're doing executive level recruitment, you're with highly educated people, and it's nice to be able to know that you're sitting across from them and there's no mystique about what their qualifications are. They're not any better than you. It's just they've gone on a different path. And I think not having a hang up about not having a degree is almost as valuable as having the degree.
And this is something we can go into more detail later, but do you find when you're looking at recruiters, do you find if they have a degree or even particularly more education like a master's or anything further, does that put clients off hiring them, or does it put them in a good space?
I don't know if it matters. Like obviously the visa crack, if you want to get into America or Australia, it helps if you've got a degree. Some of like I think companies in general have changed their their ideas on, like not just recruitment companies, but that, like, you must have a degree to get in. I think EY and the Big Four have recently taken that off their requirement for hires, and I think the recruitment industry is following suit. So I don't know if it makes a big difference. I think sometimes if you're in a big corporate recruitment firm and the guy in front of you has a degree, and people like people who mirror them, sometimes maybe that makes a difference. But I think, as you know, we're all pretty commercial in recruitment, so it's the most important thing is, like, will this guy work out, or girl, will they be able to make money?
Yeah, because I've always thought that a degree can sometimes almost be a hindrance when you're hiring a recruiter, particularly if it's relevant to the field they're recruiting in. So, if you've got a graduate with an accounting and finance degree recruiting accounting and finance roles, and they have a bad day, they can just jump in to be a trainee accountant because, for the big four firms, it's more of a filtering exercise. They don't expect them to carry any of the knowledge into their training contract. It's more of just a rubber stamp of, yes, this person can attend classes for 4 years and pass this level of academic activity, and therefore we trust they'll do that in the big four. Whereas, like, I think personally in recruitment, if you had 4 years of work experience dealing with people, that would set you up 10 times better
Big
for a
time.
job in recruitment.
I absolutely agree. It's a tough one though, isn't it? Like,
some of the best recruiters I've worked with have had those completely irrelevant degrees. Something like history and politics or some sort of science that they never really wanted to go into in the first place. They just kind of fell into it.
Yeah. Well, a large part of what we do is tell stories. So if you're studying history, you're reciting story. You're learning stories and then you're reciting them, aren't you? So I suppose there's some relevance to what we do in that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like, I found a big difference between Australia and Ireland when it comes to college education. Because in Australia, like, the unskilled labor market's so good, so you don't need, you go get a degree for a reason, so people don't slip through the gaps. Whereas in Ireland, third level education is free, so you get all these people coming out with average degrees that don't really set them up for anything, and they're the ones that often I find slip into recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, look, the 80s in Ireland, we don't remember it, but it was tough. And I think that boom happened, and all of a sudden, all the working class people decided they were middle class. And as a result, all their kids had to go to university to keep up appearances. And they put that into our psyche. And yeah, as a result, the market's flooded with average degrees.
And so you're in Brussels, you've got a master's. What next?
Well, before I go into that, just on the degree thing, sometimes people who are too smart and too analytical, I find that they get lost in the weeds a little bit with recruitment and don't actually get on with the activity of making it happen. Sometimes the best recruiters are people who don't overthink things and don't let don't overthink things and just do what's in front of them and keep doing it and doing it better. And that there tends to bring in a lot of results, or at least traditionally that's been the ideal recruiter. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's really interesting because if you look at, like I've trained lots of people with no recruitment experience, and there's a very common differential between people who come straight into recruitment from university and people who come straight in from the workforce, and it's generally one thing. When you take people straight out of college, their first 6 months, they will probably have 4 A4 pads full of notes. They note everything down. Everything you're saying, they're noting it. They're noting down calls. They're doubling up on putting stuff in the system. And it's just because they've spent the last 3 or 4 years learning through note taking. Whereas when you take someone, say, for example, who spent 4 years in a call center straight into recruitment, they just get on the phone and do it. And they just learn, and they learn by doing, and they've nothing written down.
One of my worries with somebody who's highly educated is will they be proud of doing the job? Like, will getting an excellent person a better job fulfill them in a day? Like, will they sit, like, if, like, you have a better degree than me, you did law with a lot of smart people, and you probably find yourself socializing with a lot of lawyers now. Like, is it a worry that like a recruiter could not see themselves in that light, and they'd be like going, I could have been a lawyer. What am I doing this job for instead? So that's a worry for me. I don't know if it is for you. Whereas if somebody hasn't gone to university, then maybe they see recruitment as, okay, maybe this is my way into the professional area and I can make a lot of money and that'll fulfill me in that way. So that having pride in the job and taking it is a tough thing that I think our industry struggles with.
Yeah, I massively think so. I think because a lot of people, when they hear about the job, they think it's HR and they think it's a lot more analytical than it is. And they think they're going to be, doing, psychometric testing and, meeting 5 people and, they're going to set people up for 5 years of their career. And it takes them about 6 months to realize I'm actually a salesperson. And when they realize I'm a salesperson, I could have done this after my leaving cert. I've got this degree. My parents put a lot into it. I put a lot of time into it. My friends are in training contracts. My friends are in law firms. Maybe I should be doing that. Then they tend to jump. But, one thing we've talked about a lot, and we may have touched on it when we had our chat on the podcast, but I think, the job is so basic to understand. It's about finding people who see it as a step up. Like we spoke before, there's one guy, that I worked with who, he came from a background where, a job in a listed recruitment firm, he thought he was on Wall Street. He never thought he'd even wear a suit. So he treated it like he was on Wall Street, and this was his shot at the big time, and he was exceptional,
I almost felt like that by the time I got into it, though, to be honest.
Was that partly because you'd had a few years of messing around, and because you got into it in your late 20s, and you'd had that, well, what was it, about 5 or 6 years of bar life, and you probably saw a few of your mates catching up professionally. Did you see it as a bit of a last chance saloon?
Yeah, I mean, like I remember being in Brussels and closing the nightclub I was running at 7 a.m. and cleaning the last ashtray in there and thinking, is this it? Is this so? How am I ever going to get out of this? I haven't learned anything in 2 years now. I'm drinking too much. I'm having fun, but it's that cutoff point when you're at 26 and you're like, whoa, this isn't as much fun as it was. So I remember by the time I got in, I was like, wow, this is awesome. I remember going into a meeting at Bank West in Perth and going into like the marble floorings. I sound like a peasant here, but I remember going into this and like going up to a couple of the desk at the front and then going into the elevator. And I remember saying to the guy next to me, James Clark, wow, I never thought I'd be doing this here. And he just started laughing and he got really giddy and he couldn't understand it. Like, and I was like, I'm not even going to explain. Like, yeah. So I remember that. I suppose you have to think that this type of stuff is never going to happen, and you have to be living a different life for long enough to go, okay, now I'm really going to make this work.
So are we talking like, you leaving the northwest of Ireland, like, with the tin cans on the strings coming out of your car and everyone's waving you away with handkerchiefs, and it's like Manhattan in the 1850s. You're riding back saying they're building skyscrapers here. You don't know what that is,
But I think there's clear, when I was 21 and I was leaving Donegal, I thought I was going to take over the world. I thought, I'll get to Dublin or wherever it is, and I'll be a high-flying executive within 10 minutes. It'll be no problem. Of course I will. But life beats you up a little bit. And I think that initial bit of when I didn't get into recruitment, I just went, oh, well, that's not meant to be. And I didn't have that resilience beat in me at that stage. And I think whenever I went to Australia after the bar work, and I remember I worked in the gym for a bit and I got super fit and I kind of managed my drinking a little bit better. And I met my wife and I don't know, I was more ready for that opportunity, or I was able to take it. Also, because I was in Brussels, I think it would have been slightly different if I was in London or Dublin and I had some of those mid-20 years there, because in Brussels you need to be able to speak French and Dutch to get a job. And yeah, it just never happened really.
You only spoke Buncrana. Tell us the story about
Yeah.
me. Tell us the story about being introduced to your wife the first time.
Well, she came into a gym that I was working in, and she was coming around for, she was just testing out all the gyms for free, being a cheapskate, and I sold her a gym membership, and I told her she'd be able to cancel out of it or something. I can't remember. I told a little fib or something. But she phoned up and she complained that she got charged for the joining fee, and yeah, I didn't get the call, and then she phoned up again, and I didn't get the call, and then she phoned up again, and my manager's like, "Look, this English girl keeps calling this posh bird, and she's put in a load of complaints," and I'm like, "Well, what are we going to do about it?" She's like, "I don't know, just give her a call, will you?" And because I was like, I was their top salesperson, they just like, they didn't discipline me. They were like, we just had a bit of a giggle on it, and then I just phoned her up, and we ended up going out for a drink, and that was that.
And her financial discipline has made you a much better person.
Yeah. So now instead of phoning up gyms complaining, she's phoning up clients to make sure we get paid.
So, so then you moved from Melbourne to Perth.
Yeah. So we moved from when we were in Melbourne, we had to get our second year working holiday visa. So we went and did our farm work in Queensland. So that was 3 months on a farm. Charlotte got fired from every farm we went to. So that was a real challenging time. And we eventually found a woofing farm, which is working on an organic farm for free labor. And they signed us off based on the 3 months that we did. We just didn't get any money. So we did that, and we went to Bali, spent a month in Bali, and then spent the last of our money on tailored suits, and then ended up in Western Australia. And we went to Western Australia because I remember being in a field picking beans in Queensland, in a place called Gympie, which is north of Brisbane. And the woman next to me, an Asian lady, she said, "Oh, my, have you heard of the mining boom?" And I was like, "Oh, well, what's mining?" And she said, "Oh," she kind of explained it as best possible. And she said, "Look, my sister-in-law is on the mines, and she's earning 100 grand a year as a cleaner." And I don't think I'd met anybody who'd been on 100 grand. So I was like, okay, all right. So I Googled it, had a look, and the beaches looked nice. And so, yeah, we went to Bali, and then ended up in Perth. And I remember being outside McDonald's stealing their Wi-Fi, trying to get a lend of £1,000 off my dad because we'd run out of money.
And I'm sitting here in your house in like, sleepy West Sussex, looking out at the Duke of Norfolk's castle. How did you convince a girl from here to work on a farm for free in that searing heat?
I don't know. At the time, I wished I hadn't. It was so much drama, and she had those fake nails, and she'd just come from banking and in the UK.
Coots Bank as well, the Queen's Bank.
Yeah, it was just the whole thing was an absolute disaster. But luckily, she was much better equipped for organizing. I got us through the farming, and then she kind of got us through the next stage of getting set up in Perth and making all that happen.
Okay, so talk me through deciding that you want to get into recruitment, why you went into it, why you made that decision, and then doing the different interviews.
So I just wanted to make money. That was it at this stage, and I wanted to stay in Australia. I knew that was my break. I didn't know what that was, and in Perth at the time, there was a boom happening. Charlotte did a bit of internal recruitment in Melbourne, one of the banks, and she naively thought agency recruitment was the same thing. So she was going to be the recruiter. She was going to be the agency recruiter, and did a couple of interviews and realized she didn't have a degree, so she wouldn't be able to get sponsored. So that was a bit of a drama and all the rest. But the girl in there, she spoke to a girl at Robert Walters when she was about to go out as a temp, and I think she pitched me in to for a job. So I went in anyway, and because I had a couple of degrees and had a bit of sales experience, and then that's how that process started.
So your wife recruited you into recruitment?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Now, is it true that you had your CV ripped up in front of you in your
Yeah.
in your interview? Is that legit?
Yeah, it is. Although sometimes, like, it's hard to explain what Ryan Halfrell's like. You know, he's a bit of a, it's kind of like a movie star when you first go in there, and you know you're in front of this tall, good-looking South African man who speaks and pauses, and intensely looks at you, and he could tell that I was on the piss in Brussels for about 5 years, and that, but and he was great at putting a lot of mystique and allure about the role of recruitment and what the company did and who they were and all the rest, to a point where I was like, wow, I would be so lucky if I got in here. And I was, and you know, I'm forever grateful for getting a shot at it. But once I was in, I was like, oh, right, everybody's getting a shot. It's a boom.
But do you think that's what it was about back then? Because that's where you and I met. And do you think it was do you think it's different being able to hire and retain people in the Australian market, particularly at that time? Because, you know, we needed the job, we needed the visa, you know, companies had us over a barrel. You know, the hours were 9 to 6 everywhere. That's it. Do it or don't do it. Whereas if you're working in London or Dublin or, you know, Hong Kong, Singapore, you know, people have other options.
Yeah. So I think in terms of being able to get talented people, the market in Australia for 5 or 6 years, like, the recruiters are really good, and the people are really smart, and anybody that I've worked with there has really, a lot of them have stayed in the industry. The ones who are in the top 20% in the room, they've either gone on to run their own business or be directors in businesses. And I feel like from being somebody who's across a lot of recruiters a lot of the time, like, it seemed like they were able to get a really great choice of recruiters that were smart, hardworking, but really needed to make it work, and they had them by the balls with the visa.
They did. Like, I remember, I think I interviewed in 6 places when I got to Perth, and I chose Walters based on the people. I remember just thinking, I can identify with these people more than I can those elsewhere. Like, I want to be more like them. I could see myself spending time with them. Like, they do hire a particular person.
But I think also Ryan's allure is he makes you want to be him, and when you're in front of him, he kind of makes it like, you could be me, and I'm pretty awesome, and you come out of there kind of pumped up with, like, oh, there's a journey ahead of me, but it's really attainable.
Yeah, he did, and I think he had the right age differential between us as well. Like, I mean, he was 10 years older than us, and he was a director, and he'd had a really successful career, and he looked the part too. Like, I mean, I was the same. I came from Asia, and I was wearing, you know, ridiculously baggy, you know, floral pattern shorts and super dry t-shirts for a year. And all of a sudden, this guy's sitting in front of me and, you know, dripping in TM Lewin and cool socks and smells really good. And you're like, this guy is awesome. You know, you know, maybe this is why I went to college, to be one of these guys.
Yeah, and you're thinking, I bet his wife's hot.
Yeah.
I wonder what he drives.
And I guarantee you, I mean, small things, like, he had really good looking girls coming in offering him tea and water. Like, I often thinking back, wonder if this was all deliberate. Like, you know, this after, you know, girls come in and, like, you're like, my God, this is cool. Yeah. And he's like, okay, let's see if you can do it. And then you're like, okay, you start sitting up straight and your shoulders are back and you're like, right, yeah, let's see if I can do it.
Yeah, so, and his posture was immaculate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like all those little things where you're like, oh my God, how can I be him? Yeah. And perception. And, you know, for a second there, I'm not this redneck from Buncrana, you know. I'm this slick Robert Walters guy, you know. So
and talk me through when you got into the room, day one, week one. What were your first impressions of recruitment?
So the first thing was, I remember going through the lobby, which was amazing looking, and opening the door and I'm thinking, I call center. And that was my first thought. I remember that because I was like, the allure of Ryan and how good he smelt and all the rest. I was like, I've been hoodwinked here. And then I remember thinking, but let's give it a go. Australia is awesome. But I remember thinking at the time, like, I'm 4 years older than most people in this room, and I've had way harder jobs. Like it might sound like I had a lot of fun in Brussels, but I was working my ass off to all hours, managing staff, and there was a lot of pressure there, and I was underpaid and all the rest. So I knew that this was my break, and I treated it like that, and they put me with the most intense manager possible, and I just had to try and match her intensity, which it's almost impossible. Like, she was machine like, and it pushed me to the edge.
I sometimes feel like recruitment's almost like, I don't know if you've seen Happy Gilmore, where he takes his granny into the nursing home and it looks so immaculate and beautiful and everyone's having fun. And the minute Happy Gilmore leaves, Ben Stiller's there. Okay, arts and crafts are going to be extended by 4 hours today, and he's like telling her to shut up, and they're all, you know what I mean? Like, you go into Walters and you think, my God, everyone here is a proper consultant, and they're all dressed so well, and they're making so much money, and they're changing lives. And you get in there, and it's not just Walters, it's everywhere. Everyone's there, like, stressed out beyond belief. They're all strung out on alcohol, nicotine, caffeine.
Whatever it takes.
They're bleary-eyed, and they've got a headset on, and they're terrified to tell their manager that someone's not taking the job. It's like, but the sooner you get over that, the better.
Yeah. So I think it was that the initial mystique, and then it was like, oh wow, this is going to be intense. And I remember having the recruitment dreams, and I just remember I made it my thing. Like, I became obsessed with it, and to a point where, like, well, I'm still doing it. So it was an intense time.
For business owners, or like even people managing staff, like, how important is that first week or even that first few months? Because I remember, like, you and I talking and us being like so in it, like we were so committed to the brand, we're so committed to doing well. Like, if you want clients to get people bought in straight away, what do you need to do in those first few weeks and months?
So I think the first thing is the fact that Ryan was so proud of himself transmits through everything. And when I had Toby Babb on the podcast, his whole thing was about creating pride in the job, in the brand, and in what we do. And he set up an education course to help them get there. So whenever they're at a certain point, they do an exam and a certificate, and like, so they're more proud of it. And it's rather than it's just given, and it's like, this isn't a call center, we're something more special. And whether that's true or not, it's really just about embedding that in. So that's the first thing, the perception, and the perception starts from the top. And then the next thing is, I think the intensity has to be off the charts for the first 2 months. And I mean, like, it needs to be so intense that they're able to make, and they know if this is going to be right by the end of the 2 months. And in many cases, we're tiptoeing around people now, and we're saying, oh, here's a fruit bowl. Why don't you come in? And it's all wonderful, and you can work from home straight away. And I think, like, all the perks, all the benefits, everything needs to be earned. But to get to understand what you have to do, and to really get it, like, that intensity is the most important thing. And again, that is who your manager is. And they have to be in it. They have to be the most committed person. They have to be almost that Roy Keane like character. And in my view, in the perfect world, and then I suppose beyond that, and once somebody is embedded, then hopefully they can transmit that to the next person.
And do you think, is that an attitudinal thing, or is it only KPIs can achieve that level of intensity?
I think you need to want it. You need to have to want it as well. Like, I think it comes back to the people you hire again? Like, do they need it enough? You know, like it. I think, like, you know, when you listen to the Wolf of Wall Street, or you watch the Wolf of Wall Street, and he's talking about he's talking to his dad, like, you know, I know this looks crazy, but they need to live the life that I'm living, and they need to want, they need to they need to be spending the money, they need to be making the money, they need to be all in it. I remember they were saying to me, you should get a nicer car, you know, you should get a you should buy a house, you should do this, you know. They're trying to get you wrapped into it all, which is fine, you know. It is what it is what it is. You need to there needs to be something that's driving you, whether that's money, whether it's money or purpose. And in recruitment, in many ways, it's hard to find a purpose outside of yourself.
Yeah, and an interesting thing on that is, I remember talking to one of the guys we worked with who was ex-Badenoch and Clark, and he said, you know, they asked him, what are the three most important things you want out of your job in the interview process? And if they don't say money in the top three, they don't get hired. And I don't think I've ever worked with a bad person from B&C.
Yeah, they're definitely, or they were a really good recruitment firm. They sold to Adecco, didn't they?
Yeah. If you were to recommend anyone getting into recruitment as a company to join for that first initial 6 months of training, who's the best company at training recruiters?
Well, the best recruiters come from S3.
Okay, and why is that?
I think they instill a bit of discipline and empowerment into the people. So they like the intensity of the work and the sales stuff. Probably, I don't know. It's a tough question. So when I look at my client list now, most of the founders of the companies come from S3, and they've taken a lot of the practices that S3 do. So S3, you go in, you set up a desk, or you work for somebody, then you set up your own desk, then you have a couple of resourcers, and you set up, you build out your team. Then before you know it, you're setting up a new office. You're setting up a new country. You're like, it's aggressive growth to a point where like 28-year-olds could be managing like a massive operation. Now, that's not the way S3 is now, because they've scaled, they're listed, all the rest. But that journey that they went on aggressively and globally has been replicated by Faden and Oliver James and the Frank Group and GQR and like any of the other companies out there that are scaling. Spencer Ogden or another one that have done it. They all follow the same formula, and then they add their own personality traits and maybe a bit of technology and a bit of some of the softer stuff. But it's all very formulaic. Was that a long-winded answer?
Yeah. Well, okay. So what is that formula then?
It's letting somebody, in its essence, it's letting somebody be entrepreneurial within the business.
Okay, so how do you couple that with it? Because I mean, you said you mentioned that, you know, it's empowering, but it's discipline, which is almost like an oxymoron. So how do you do that when really getting the intensity out of them? You know, you're telling them what to do, but you want them to be empowered. You know, it's almost a contradiction.
I suppose the thing is, like, you have to earn the stripes to be able to tell other people what to do. So you have to sell the benefits to them. Like, look, if you do all this, you'll be managing a team of people doing this, and you will get other stuff from it. But in order for this framework to work, you need to buy in and be part of it.
Okay. So talk me through your journey, because you went from being the newest guy in the room to the best performer in the room in what would that have been 18 months? Less?
Probably about a year, yeah.
Okay. How did you do that?
Well, I had the best manager, first of all. And I was on a good high intensity desk. The senior con left, so I inherited all his stuff, and then I really just joined the dots quicker than the next guy. Then
what made it the best manager?
Just that intensity. That's like,
Just relentless.
Relentless. Like, I mean, there's no way to describe. There's no way. Like, they don't make her. They don't like. Nobody's like her. Any business that gets somebody like that, you've just become a millionaire. Congratulations. Go to the Bahamas and retire. Let her run it. She's obsessed, and as a result, the team becomes obsessed, and she never drops her standards. Like, she wasn't exactly cuddly,
Yeah.
But like, brilliant what she did, and because of that, I think her team learned how to join the dots quicker, and that joining the dots is the biggest thing.
Define that.
Like, it's being able to do an activity and make it lead to the next. Does that make sense in the simplest terms?
Yeah, so like process mapping it out and just doing each stage.
Well, if I'm calling somebody, in the conversation, they're probably going to tell me about their friend, or they're going to tell me about a business that's happening, and then I'm going to look up that business. I'm going to pick up a job, and then maybe I'll do that job and go out for lunch with the client, and then that client will introduce me to another client, and then we'll all go out for a beer, and then their mate's looking for a job. Like, it's just one thing leads to the next, and there's never just an activity for an activity's sake. And once that ball rolls and you've got multiple balls rolling at the same time, then the outcome's going to be greater at the end of it.
Okay. So talk me through then, once you became the best performer, how did you keep yourself motivated?
I'm not sure I did. I think that's definitely one of my weaknesses. I ebb and flow. I overthink things. Knowing what I know now, I could have done a lot more. But fear of not being at the top of the room, was it? So it was completely ego. Like, yeah. That was part of my identity. Like, I'm the best in here. I'm going to be the best in here. And if somebody comes in and they're better, well, I'm hanging out with them.
Yeah.
Like, so David Eyre comes in. I'm like, okay, you're better. Okay, how can I be more like you? What is it that you have? What's your secret sauce? I think I was playing on 3 of his football teams within 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Do
you think a large part of it is about surrounding yourself with people like that as well? You need to have those characters around. Like, I remember going on meetings with Dave, and like, I was probably 26 or something, pretty broke, and we'd stop off in the shop on the way back from the meeting, and he'd buy $1,000 jacket for that night out. And then we jump into his sports car, and you'd have to pick my tongue up off my shoe sometimes. And do you think a large part of it is just surrounding yourself with people like that and just copying them?
Yeah, or taking whatever it is you think that sets them apart. Like for me, I'm not a materialistic person sitting in my nice house in West Sussex. I know.
No, but you enjoy the achievement of making it, not the material that comes from vending it.
I also enjoy looking at what it is that would set him apart. Like when I watch he's very logical. So I'm a little bit logical, but maybe he's better at it. Maybe there's something that he's doing that I'm not. And I remember he took me into a room, and he I don't think he was supposed to. He was on the other side, but he just was like, "Look, I think you could be quite good at this, but you're doing a few things wrong." And I was like, "What about this? What about that?" And he's like, "You're trying to be too creative. You're trying to find a way out of the work. You're trying to find a way that you don't need to. Look, this is simple. It's working for you because you're treating it as simple. But if you overcomplicate it, you're going to trip yourself up, and it's not going to work. And why don't you just be more like me?"
Yeah. Do you think a large part of it goes back to because I learned everything from Dave, and just an absolutely exceptional recruiter. And one thing that was always fascinated by was how obsessed he was with work. Like, if you turn the conversation to recruitment at any point in any situation with him, it could last for 3 hours, and you'd always learn something new. Do you think that's what you need to be honest with yourself about if you are in recruitment or any job in general, that the people who do make it to the top of most professions, they're obsessed with it, and they love it, and they just deep dive into it, and therefore they become really good at it. So do you reckon that's the
Yeah.
case with a lot of recruiters, that they, if you don't love it, if you're not obsessed with it, or if it's not floating your boat in some massive way, you should really just get out?
Yeah, absolutely. But you need to be either be obsessed with it or obsessed with yourself. Whatever it is, but like it, you have to be into it. Like you have to be really into it to get really good at it. Whether you're one person like Rich Rosen, who I interviewed, who does $1 million a year and sits in his office in Boston, he's obsessed with it. He's on recruiter groups all day long. He just does recruitment. He's into it. Or you're like one of the many founders that I had on. They're obsessed with it. They're obsessed with themselves. They're obsessed with their brand. They're obsessed like with talking about recruitment. They're out there. They're imploring that to everybody they meet to get obsessed as well. And if you want to join in, like the best recruitment companies are the ones that aren't the ones that are saying, "Oh, come on in and work from home, and we've got avocado and toast here." They're the ones that are saying like, he makes $1 million a year, he makes $500,000. Here's somebody who joined 6 months ago and they've been promoted twice and they're likely going to do 200 next year. Here's somebody just like you who makes X amount. Now, if you want to join this and you want to get in, here's where you can get to, but this isn't, you're not in this to have avocado toast. You're in this to work all the time and just burn through it. And if you get up to a certain level, then you can take your foot off the gas a little bit if you want, but not for the first period of time or the first years.
If you look at a lot of the guys you've been interviewing, you're talking about like the top 1% of the recruitment industry. What do they have that everyone who started with them, the other 99% didn't have?
I don't know. Staying power would be the main thing. It's half the battle, isn't it? Turning up and doing the work. Because a lot of them, not all of them got great at the start. Like they didn't build serious money. Like when you started in Perth, you I don't think you mind me saying you didn't set the world alight.
No.
But when you took all the lessons you learned and you started in Dublin, straight away you became the biggest biller in that room and set up an office. So over time you got better, but it was staying power that was your key differentiator.
Yeah. I've always said that. Like when actually, to be honest, Ryan told us that as well. Like I asked him for advice at the start, and he said, just sit in the same seat. He said, sit in the same seat, don't leave. Everyone else will fall off around you. They'll either fall off internally or your competitors will fall off.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk to me about deciding to leave Perth and going to Canada.
Charlotte was never settled in Perth. I was burnt out. I couldn't do the KPIs anymore at Walters. I didn't like the discretionary bonus. I felt like I wasn't learning anymore. And I got to that point 3 years, 3 years doing the same thing. And I could also see the macro stuff changing in the market. I could see that dip coming. And I was in a very niche area. Like they divided my desk about 4 times from giving me that amazing one to start with. And we're just, I think all those factors kind of played into place, and we decided we'd make the move. And it just felt like our whole generation was starting to move a little bit back. Like that whole time in Perth was coming to an end. I don't know. Maybe that was it.
Yeah, I think there was definitely like a demographic there as well. Like I feel like most people who are over there, they probably went over in their early to mid 20s, and then there was like a mixture of factors where the economy was rebounding in Ireland, but our age group were also hitting their kind of late 20s, 30s, where like, the women wanted to have children, they wanted their mothers around, and there were more jobs for people back home, and it was like a mass exodus over like a 2-year period.
Yeah, so it was a lot of those things put together, and it just felt like it was time for the next adventure, really.
So talk to me about Canada.
So the first thing we did was Charlotte was at Chevron in Perth, and we did a wee recce mission to Canada. Went and checked it out. The oil and gas market was booming, it was flying, it was unbelievable, and percentage fees 20, 25 points instead of the 15 in Perth. Commission rates that were paid looked a lot higher, and it just looked like a good, different type of opportunity. And it was that bit closer to the States, which I've always felt aligned to. So we came back and we decided, okay, we'll do a bit of traveling first. And we set up a resume writing company just to pay some bills and do that. And we basically just cashed in on all Charlotte's connections from her LinkedIn, because everybody wanted a job in Chevron, and she kind of knew the inside track and the formats and all of that, or at least that's how we branded it. And that was the first wee business that we set up.
How'd it go?
Went all right. I mean, lots of lessons learned. It kind of learned that like something like that it's very hard to scale, because it was uniquely set up around her amazing ability to look at a document and make it amazing. And you could outsource pieces of that, but you really can't do much of it. And I could sell the shit out of it, but all I was doing was overloading her with work. So while it paid for us to travel through Southeast Asia and Guatemala, and that ultimately, like it wasn't as fruitful as what our careers would have been.
Okay, so how's recruiting in Calgary compared to Perth?
Well, if it had been a year earlier, it would have been pretty similar or even better. The figures that people were doing at Robert Half in Calgary were probably higher than they were in Perth. So that's probably like, and considering they were they were top performers in Robert Half in Perth, it probably give you a bit of an idea of what the market was like. It's full on oil and gas. Like in Perth, there's 4 or 5 oil and gas players. In Calgary, there's hundreds. Like it's oil and gas central. So it did a few interviews, and got offered a job at NES as a managing consultant, and ended up deciding to take a role with David Applin Group as setting up an IT recruitment business. They'd done it years ago before, but hadn't done it since.
Okay, how did it go?
Absolute disaster.
Why?
A couple of things. First thing was market. So the market tanked. The oil and gas price went, and it's an oil and gas town, so that went up like overnight. So I'd hired a couple of people, had a wee team going. We were kind of making a wee bit of traction, and then it was like the lights went out. It's very hard to describe what that oil and gas crash was like in Calgary. It was very difficult. So that happened. But even if that didn't happen, I'm not sure I would have done it right. And I learned a lot of lessons.
What did you learn?
That I was handed a lot at Walters. That I had a nice database, that all I had to do was make it better on both sides, candidates and clients, that I had a big advertising budget, that my manager had 50 odd relationships in the marketplace, that I was leveraging on 10 years of good work that they'd done, and that really it was harder for me to fail than succeed. Whereas I was just like working for Applin, I should have just sat in a WeWork office and did it for myself for a year. I would have done better.
Do you think, because this is a question people ask sometimes, do you think it's better for people to train in a smaller company like that, where they do a much more rounded process, they aren't handed as much, and it's real sink or swim, or start off in a big boy like Walters, where you do have, a lot of your day is taken away from you from an admin perspective, marketing, credit control?
I think it's good to start in the big boy, because our industry cuts too many people in the first year. So it's easier to get through that first year at a big player, and it's a softer landing. But the other thing is, there's an intensity at the big players that you learn, and a bit of best practice, and you get access to better people. So because and there's usually a repeatable formula. So I would start at a big player, but definitely if you want to be a fully rounded recruitment entrepreneur, getting both experiences absolutely shaped the way I look at things.
because your career history is very, very similar of a lot of business owners in recruitment. They start off with a big boy. They get they learn best practice. They're surrounded by good people, and they also have the shot to bill well, which I think is a big thing. Like I've seen lots of people, in environments where they could have been really good, but they just didn't have either the desk there or didn't have the right manager, etc. So they get that at the start, but then they go into a bit of a boutique like you did, and they kind of learn Jesus is a bit harder than I thought, and then they go on to do their own thing. Is that the set formula you reckon for setting up your own gig?
Look, I don't know if they're like. It depends on what your own gig is. That's the short answer. Like if in an ideal world, if you want to build a recruitment company that's going to scale, I think the best thing you can do is work for a big player, get known, do that, then get funded, set up in the same marketplace, in the same niche, like take 6 months out, whatever it is, whatever your restrictive covenants is, and then crack on from there. Make sure it's specialist and all the rest, and you can build from there. What we did was kind of fell into a niche that isn't really that scalable. I didn't really think, okay, this is where the business could be in 5 years' time. Like I thought like I'd get a couple of fees at Rec and then I'd sidestep into tech within 6 months.
Okay, so where was the idea of the Rec business born in the first place, and how did it go from there?
So whenever I was interviewing for NES and Applin Group, I remember I went in. A Rec flicked me into NES. Works for, she has her own company now, but she worked for one of the big Rec firms in the north of England. Can't remember their name now, but they put me in there, and I talked to the guys there, and really, really, really good company, NES. And I remember they offered me, they made it an all right offer. I turned it down, and he phoned me up and he said, "Come on out for a drink." So we went drinking for a few hours, and I said to him, "Look, are you still looking for that person?" He said, "Yeah, come on, take the job. Here's the offer." I said, "No, look, my wife's got a Rec business. She'll fill it for you." And Charlotte hadn't secured a job yet. She's a brilliant recruiter, and she was doing a few of the resume stuff that we still had going on the side. So I came in about half cut, and I said to her, "Look, you're a Rec now. Here's the job spec. I've signed some terms of business." So Charlotte spent 3 days, found somebody, filled the job, and long story short, that paid for our wedding, and then she ended up actually working as their internal recruiter at a later date.
Sorry, take a step back, because I'm always fascinated by the first placement, because having been involved in like a couple of different companies and starting up different offices, like you never forget your first deal. How did it feel?
Well, because I suppose that was our first deal, but Charlotte went and got a job then, and we didn't carry it on. But that was our first Rec placement, so it felt like money for nothing at the time. Like it felt like we'd gamed the system.
So why didn't you just keep doing it? Like after filling the first one, why didn't you go, right, that worked really quickly, like I can do this?
I suppose we spent all our money getting to Canada, and I just started a new job, and Charlotte didn't want to be a business person. Like she'd made that very clear. Like she only did this because I kind of put her into a corner and kind of said, "Here's the job spec. Well, why don't you do it?" So we could have carried on, and we probably should have, but we kind of just hunkered down and did it for another 6 months, and then she worked for NES for a bit, and then she was made redundant because of the crash, and my job wasn't going well. And I remember we were sitting in Red's diner, and I think I was self-medicating with booze again, as I do when things aren't going well. It was snowing, and it was almost summertime, as it is in Canada sometimes. And we just, like, she'd just been made redundant, and I remember thinking my job's not going anywhere, or it's not really working. And I just remember thinking, this isn't working. And she said, "When were you last happy?" And I said, look, when we were in Guatemala, she said, wait, that's where we're going. We're going to set up. We're going to set up our business. We're going to set up a business and go to Guatemala.
Wow.
And we did. So yeah, we had a couple of clients to start, people that I just interviewed with, and I think I changed my LinkedIn status, and then that was where it began.
Interesting driver. What, when we last happy, and then go back to that, and then go back to doing something you're interested in.
Yeah, like, because I think she'd seen how pumped up I was. Like, even with the resume writing business, like, I liked being strategic and being entrepreneurial, and like just doing my own thing, and being a master of my own destiny. And not having that had really affected me. And so getting back to that point, like, I think that the location was whatever. It was really, really being the master of my own destiny.
So, because it's almost like there was a mixture of, necessity is the mother of invention, because you weren't happy where you were, but then realizing what did make you happy. I'm always fascinated by this. Like, when do you, from all the people you work with and candidates you work with, when do you think it's the right time for people to go out on their own?
I don't know. You kind of, do you remember when we worked with Gareth McGlynn?
Yep.
And I've had him on the podcast. He knew after a month of being in recruitment, he was going to set up his own business, probably.
Yeah.
And because that's just the way he's built. Like he couldn't take direction off anybody. He still can't. But like, he knows how to hustle a deal, and he knows that he wants to be his own boss. And as soon as he learned something that was high enough up the food chain to create a business out of, he was going to do that. I'm a bit like that as well, and I think that's why I did the masters. I did. I always kind of thought I was going to do that at the first available opportunity. So I don't think there's a right time or a wrong time to set up, but you have to really, really want it.
Do you think so? You think that's even more important than having, that local network or the candidates or the clients? You just think it's either in you or it's not.
Yeah, well, you just have to really want it. Like, I mean, it's not an ability thing. Like, you have to, like, it's just down to like drive, work ethic, and doing it. Like, if you know more, great. If you got more connections, great. If you got more money, great. But most people could set up a LinkedIn account and do 1,000 cold calls and close a deal in 2 months. And it's what you do with that first from there that matters. So I don't think there's a magic formula. You just need to really want it, because to do all that work is a ton of work, and it's a ton of risk.
So if you're obviously, you've demonstrated to yourself you can set up a recruitment business. Why are you still recruiting recruiters who are, some of the most untrustworthy, unreliable people on the planet?
It's a really, really good. A lot going on in the last 3 years. So, like, we've had 2 kids. Charlotte's kind of exited the business more or less 2 years ago. So some of the things have kept me going, like getting a couple of assistants and learning how to do that, and learn how to automate my business. And in that, I think, like, being a sole breadwinner and knowing that that's coming in and we have a good life from it, it's very hard for me to go, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to focus in on being a tech recruiter. And I think for a lot, up until recently, very recently, I've had aspirations to sidestep into tech. But I think doing the podcast and getting to kind of know, like, that's been a great outlet, because I've got to know more interesting people in the industry, and things like that have just made me realize that I'm just going to double down in this space and be known
How did
as
you
the
narrow
guy
your
who does
market
this.
to the sort of niche you've developed now?
Well, because we just did lots of traveling, and we had lots of contacts who, like, my networks, like a lot like yours. Like, we've got lots of mates who are owners or managers who are based all around the world in recruitment, and we kind of know how the big players operate. So we started by just tracking Page and Walters around the world, Um, and then we were just kind of led where the market was. And Australia was the easy money for a while. And then when that dried up, America was the focus. And then now that we're close to London, I'm enjoying working a bit more in this space as well. So I think we fell into the international piece, and it's been really good for us. But I would prefer to be as much in London and Dublin as the international. And the hard piece for me is I have the same network knowledge in Dublin and in London as a lot of the local players do, and I have the same network knowledge in New York and Sydney as a lot of the local players do. But to transmit that to somebody who's already over in the marketplace can be quite a challenge, because they're like, well, you can't meet me, depending on which market. Like, but I'm like, oh, bloody, I kind of know. Like, I've been doing this for 3.5 years now, so like that's
so for you to represent the candidate, what do you need from them? What do you need to see from them?
I suppose you know when you're in that first conversation with them, I need to see that they can build rapport, and that like listen, I've represented candidates that don't have great personalities before, but I've probably put them somewhere where they didn't need it. We've had hardly any backouts in our time, so we're really particular because we're working with the top percentage of people for the abroad thing. I've become very fussy. That's one of the things Ryan said. He said you'd be a rubbish rec direct because you'd think all the recruiters are crap and you'd not want to represent any of them. And it's something that we definitely were a bit too. I don't know what to say, but we definitely shot a bit like only dealing with people who've billed X amount. I think the minimum is if somebody's doing 1.5 to 2.5 placements a month and they've been in the same job for 2 years or 18 months and they're at a brand that is like, we have a good idea that they're doing things the right way, and they're in a discipline where there's an element of headhunting and private sector, so IT, finance, all that jazz. Like, if they're within that remit, I'd like to work with them. And if they're not too senior, if they're 1 to 5 years, I want to work with those type of people, because they're the best people in the eyes of the consumer. And I believe our job as recruiters is not to fill the job; it's to find the best people, better jobs. And I've always worked by that principle, even when I was in Walters. Work with the best candidates.
What's a minimum billing level you need to see from someone before you can send them to a client?
So not all billings are the same. That's the first thing I'd say. So you could be a very average recruiter doing 300K, sending stockbrokers or working an oil and gas account in a boom, or you could be a great transactional finance recruiter doing 100 in the north of England. So generally 100 is the mark of like, how are you doing?
Okay.
That's 3 times salary mostly. All right, so that would be the bare minimum, but I'd always try and work backwards on like, what was it within that 100 and where did the business come from, and does the person have potential?
How do you spot a bluffer?
Yeah, first thing you do is I get them to ask. Well, they'll usually talk at you and not ask you questions.
And how do you test a fake? So that was part 1 of our chat, which was interrupted by 2 screaming kids and bottle time, where we really went through Dualta's journey into recruitment and what's taken him to this point today. And we're now hoping to concentrate part 2 on really delving into Dualta's real journey into inbound marketing, particularly the podcast, where the idea came from, what he's learned from it, what the future is, and then really keen to delve into what he's learned about making a successful recruitment business and what he believes are the different components that are going to make recruitment change over the next few years.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.